So, welcome to the Ashcast Online with me in my very first episode of this online version. We've got the one and only Jippery McCloud. Go ahead and introduce yourself, buddy.
Hey folks, my name is Brandon Bose. You know me better as Jippery McCloud. I've been playing Gears of War competitively since the MLG days of Gears of War 2, followed by going into a lot of the Hype Fest stations and Winter Brawls with everyone in Philadelphia area, the good old ballroom days. And overall, I'm just a pretty optimistic guy in the Gears of War scene, and I always try to do as much as I can to help out with community members and keep growing the amateur scene and try to do my best to basically make us more well aware as well as growth. So I'm happy to be here, and I'd like to thank you, Ashes, for having me on today.
Of course, man. It's my pleasure. And you actually mentioned one of the things that made me want to have you as my first guest, and that's your positivity within the community. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of the amateur scene that I actually follow, but and admittedly, I didn't actually follow you on Twitter until maybe like a week or two ago. Yep. But I saw constantly on my timeline just the way you handled yourself on Twitter. You tried very hard to keep people in the loop with what was going on with PGL, what was going on with the open bracket and the amateur scene, and just kind of carried yourself in that professional demeanor that I always tried to do myself. Maybe I probably have admittedly failed sometimes, but it was something that I really respected, and it kind of gave me this idea of like, okay, that's someone who I could easily talk to because of just the way I see him handling himself and carrying himself on social media about this amateur scene that I don't think a lot of people really give enough attention to. So it's that was the like the big thing that caught my eye for you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that was the thing that definitely caught your attention. I always try my best to keep everyone in the loop. I mean, throughout all the years of competing in Gears of War, there's a lot of focus on the pros, which, give their credit. They're supposed to be on the spotlight and we're supposed to see them all the time.
Yeah.
But I know throughout all my years of competing, there's been a lot of other amateurs, including myself, that was wondering, how can we get our overall gameplay to the viewers at home? What can we do to get more insight on what we're doing, going through the trenches with everybody at the LAN events. And when it comes down to it, it's just being able to build that community through the amateur league to be able to try to build us all up and just get us out there more and more involved as an overall community. And it's just, trying to be nice is usually contagious, and trying to be optimistic is the way to go. Sometimes it's honestly the hardest thing to do. But at the end of the day, if you know a few nice people and you can go to them and talk to them, ask questions, and know they won't shoot you down, but try to help you, that's basically what I try to be here for, not only as a player, but in a weird way, amateur community manager. I mean, I just try my best to help everybody. So
yeah. Well, I mean, that's really important. And that's how I started as well. I wanted to be that guy who people could look to for help, the players that didn't know how to handle contracts or didn't know, what the next step was to kind of pursue their careers. And honestly, I when I started, I didn't know either. But, I figured if I'm going to learn how to do it and figure this out, I can help other people along the way. So it's awesome to hear somebody else with that same mindset, especially in the Gears of War community. So one of the main things I have to ask you off the rip is Jippery McCloud. How did that name come to be?
So honestly, it's as weird as a story as you probably think. I think most people can probably guess the second part with the name McCloud. A lot of people ask me, is that a Braveheart reference because you're Scottish? Answer is no. Actually, it is because Star Fox 64 was one of my favorite Nintendo 64 games of all time.
Okay.
So I got to pay homage to Fox McCloud. And then the first part, honestly, is just idiotic to be, just truthful. So back when I was growing up, I lived in a house. I have one sibling, which is a sister. Mm-hmm. And at the time, she was dating a guy named Brandon. Unfortunately, my name is also Brandon, so that's already awkward. And her boyfriend's best friend's name was Brandon as well. So there was a time in my life, there was 3 Brandons, and I found that kind of be disgusting and scary all at once because, you never want to think your sister is dating someone with your name. Just weird.
Yeah.
And one day I was just thinking, what type of nickname can I give myself? And honest to God, I was sitting there just making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. and I was using Jif. That's my brand of peanut butter that I always go to. And there was a misprint on it. So instead of the F, it was a P at the end, and it spelled Jip, Jip. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds like a fun nickname, but how do I make it sound more like an actual person? So I ended up putting the Puri at the end, which made Jippery, added with McCloud. And then after all these years, I'm in the field of trying to do marketing and stuff. My wife and I own a business in multimedia studios, so we do web design, branding, all that type of stuff. So I was trying to think, how do I brand myself even more with this? And that's where the famous hashtag Get Gypped came from, because I was always out there gypping people in the competitive scene when I was going against them. So
okay, that was my follow-up question, because I've seen that as well. Okay. So because you were gypping people in the like in matches and scrims and whatnot, okay, I respect it.
And it's awesome because like for a while there, when we were getting towards season 2, Gears of War 4, and going into 5, it's like every time I played 2K, my team would end up beating a team because we were underdogs, so to say. The timeline would go crazy in the amateur scene and start saying "get gypped" everywhere. So it's pretty awesome.
That is cool to see it catch on like that. That's got to be really cool for you.
Yep, I'm always excited. And like I said, always trying to push out content, whether it's for the community or, just trying to monopolize myself a little bit by trying to get my brand and content out there as well at the same time. So
that's awesome. And I saw you do is it more like a blog, or because I read it, it was your like your update. It read like a blog, but it was on like a personal website rather than like a blogging site. So tell me about that.
Yeah, that's correct. So I ended up creating a website called jipgaming.com. I'm pretty sure if you also type in getjip.com, it redirects there. So either one will work. And what my vision was for that was I wanted to, again, build my own brand and build myself, but I also wanted to be able to somehow contribute back to the community. And when I look at the Gears of War community, there's a lot of videos that are made, which are great. We need, more video content as well. But going back to the whole conversation early about the amateur scene, I just didn't feel like there was really that much going on for us. There wasn't anyone really talking about it. And being in the amateur scene for so long, I thought, what better way to promote what's going on, roster changes, and how to get people hyped than writing articles and blogs and all that type of nature about the amateur scene. So I think it was about, honestly, 2 months ago when we were doing the weekly PGL Sunday tournaments for Challenger points that I ended up doing my own little version of the power rankings for all the teams that were inside of the amateur scene fighting for those spots. I ended up breaking down the rosters and specifying why I thought this roster was better than the other one this week, or what they could do to be better, or what inconsistencies they're having. And that kind of jump-started everything, because I ended up having a lot of other amateur players in the scene always asking me, like, hey, when's the next, power rankings coming out? When are you going to be able to fill us in on where you think we sit now? And that was one big jump for me to continue trying to pump more content into the community in that regards.
Yeah.
But then the other thing that really made me keep going with trying to develop more of this website is just the fact that when we were doing the Challenger point standings, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the amount of times that seeding points were not given correctly to teams and other mix-ups, but I'll save that for a little bit later. Just to give the short version for now, I actually had a live updated Google sheet that all players could constantly look at. They would be able to see their points per week, and they were also able to see how the rosters changed from one week to the next.
Wow. So how did you find time to stat track, I guess is the right way, or just keep this sheet active and live? I mean, especially knowing the roster issues that plague, the Gears community as a whole, not even just the amateur scene.
I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, it's just for passion and love for the game and the franchise that I love. I mean, time, it's valuable. It's always hard to be able to, you can't really get any more time. You just got to make time for it, so to say. And what I always do is I wait until about 8 o'clock Saturday night. I'd hop onto the PGL website. I would comb through all the registered teams at that time, try to update not only that sheet as much as I could, but also update the power rankings and publish them Saturday night before I go to sleep, because then I would have to wake up Sunday early to get ready for the tournament. And then I would do one last check to see if any other teams joined before the cutoff at noon.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would end up adding them to the overall sheet. I would end up adding their rosters at that time while we were getting ready to do our scrims. And then throughout the day, when all the rounds were going off, I'd be able to calculate where those teams and how many points they got from where they finished in the overall bracket, throw it onto the Excel spreadsheet, and then quickly adjust and change where they are in numerical value of their points. So
wow.
At the end of the day, it's just love. I mean, I love the damn game and franchise, and I'm trying to do as much as I can on my part with the time I have to be able to do some type of help and growth to the community. So
I respect it. And that's a really good point or I guess it's not a point, but just a topic of time and time management, time use. There's a vlogger that I watch a lot. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name's Ryan Sternhardt. He's actually a real estate salesman in New York. So he does a lot of inspirational type of vlogs and then, crazy multi-billion-dollar, million-dollar house tours, which is what got me addicted, the dream. But one of the episodes he talks about how every day he thinks about, he wakes up and I'm rich with time. It's my own personal bank. It's my time bank. And I have an infinite amount of time, it feels, every morning. And it's about how you spend that, how you budget your time throughout the day. And I think that's something that a lot of pro players and amateur players alike don't do very well. So for someone like you, tell me a little bit about how you're able to balance out. You said you have a wife, correct? So,
that's correct.
So you have a personal life, clearly. You're not, just some introvert who's alone and mom's, that stereotypical mom's basement gamer kind of thing. So you're an adult. You have a wife. You have a business that you're running with her. So you've obviously got the work obligations. You're still competing. And at a pretty high level in the amateur scene, I would say. And
why, thank you for that.
And then you've also got these other extracurricular things that you're doing, like this spreadsheet. So how do you balance that all out in your average day?
Well, I mean, first off, you just want to make sure that you try to rank everything in the value of how much time you need with it. So obviously things like spending time with my wife and finishing the jobs, they're like the ones that take the big blocks, and you start with them because they're like your rock to life. They're going to always be there. They're going to be the things that make you go through life happy, get you financially by. So you try to block out the time that you need to make for those things first. And then after you can have that set and look at the rest of the schedule, that's when you can start piecing together the bits. So when this overall San Diego event was happening, just to explain how crazy my life was at the time, it was fun, but crazy, mind you. I technically teach at a high school for interactive media productions as a full-time teacher there. And that job goes from 7:50 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon. And then I would come home and spend time with my wife until about 8 o'clock at night, where I would end up doing scrims with the team 8 to 12 to midnight. And then I would go to bed. And that was usually the schedule for Monday, Wednesday. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, on Tuesday, Thursday, I didn't scrim because, one, I had personal time with my wife. But then, two, I also am currently going for my master's degree. And I'm also getting my teacher certification for the state of Maryland. So I had 3 college classes I had to worry about from 5:30 to 8 on Tuesday, Thursday. So you just basically, when it comes to scheduling that time, you just get the parts that you can't move first down or you want to make a consistent habit of. Because when it comes down to trying to make something into a habit, it's usually, I think by rule of thumb, 3 weeks of doing it consistently that ends up making it stick. So I basically would end up doing that. And then after I had my time with my wife's schedule, my college classes, my full-time job, my scrims, then I would end up making free time. So my team's rule of thumb is we don't play on days that start with T. And what that means is we're usually busy because a lot of my teammates have full-time jobs as well. Mm-hmm. But there are also days where we can watch VOD, where we can end up making new strategies, where we can talk about it, throw it into our Discord chat, review issues we had from that prior night of scrims or games. And then it just constantly comes together. And I mean, sometimes, again, if you love something, you push the limits. So there are times where I'll be sitting in my office until about 2-3 o'clock at night trying to work on something, whether it's one of the things that I feel like need even more attention than I originally budgeted time for, or sometimes you just got to move the blocks around. So when it comes to it, my rule would just be make sure the things that really make your life happy outside of competing makes your world turn, so to say. You cement that first, and then after that, you can start putting the rest of the pieces in, like you're playing Tetris. So
Nice. I think that's really good advice for a lot of players out there who might not know how to balance out, like, oh, I have high school and I don't know how to balance that out. My mom said I need to get a job or whatever the case may be. And I have a kind of similar story. When I first started coaching my team, I was owning and operating a donut shop. I actually lived in Maryland. I lived in Ocean City.
Nice.
And I went to college in Baltimore. So I was owning and operating a donut shop in Ocean City, and I had to be up at 5 a.m., but our scrims were ending the night before around 1 or 2 a.m. So it again was that, I really loved it. So I could see the path turning into a career. So I obviously wasn't going to give that up. And, there's definitely a little bit of, I had to sacrifice a little bit more than I was getting back at the time, but it ends up paying off dividends as long as you keep working towards it and putting in the proper efforts and trying to balance everything else out. So it's awesome to see that there's somebody else who's seeing that as a success for themselves as well. So we talked a little bit about the amateur scene. We've kind of been hinting at it, and I think that's a really big thing that I want to get into. So you've been competing since, you said, Gears 2 days?
Yep, for a long time.
Yeah, I was competing in Gears 2 as well, so it's been a long time. This is not a brag, or maybe it's a humble brag, since I've had to deal with the being an amateur. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Ever since I kind of hung up the sticks competing and switched to League of Legends, I was technically an amateur manager and coach in that scene. But since I came back to this, we only had a couple months before we won our first event, and that title of being amateurs or online warriors or whatever got kind of cleaned away from
basically.
it. Exactly. So you've obviously been in the trenches, so to speak, for a while. Tell me about what your kind of experience is like being in the Gears of War amateur scene, especially recently in a game like 4 or 5.
Well, honestly, it is one of the most invigorating, exciting, and craziest types of events you can be a part of. I mean, when you're down in the trenches, you basically are putting your all into it. You're taking everything that you've done from scrims and tournaments and practice and all the different types of strategies you talk about, and it all basically lies on this weekend event. I mean, there's usually about 4 every year, but it's basically just like a gut check. Like, all right, we have to come prepared. We have to be ready. And for like newcomers, if you're coming onto the LAN scene, of course, you got to get the butterflies out, so to say. But for someone that's been kind of in the trenches for a long time, it's one of the most exciting and thrilling things you could possibly ever imagine. I mean, you're basically going against other great players. You're talking your trash. You're standing up and yelling at each other like you get ready to throw down, and it really gets that primal instinct out of you. But then at the same time, as a competitor and someone who respects the scene and other players, you can, at the end of the game, even after all that trash is talked, you can still go over to the other side of the table and shake hands, say good games, and it's like nothing ever happened. It's just the fierce passion and love that all these players have. And it's unlike any other event or esport that I've ever watched or attended. It's one that you can really just, go all out with your emotions, with your pride, just like we used to play back in the ballroom days of 3. That's really all we had.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's an unreal feeling. You can't really explain how amazing of a franchise Gears of War is until you play it on LAN with a bunch of other people that love the game and franchise as much as you do, because you're all there to compete your hearts out, and it really shows. And it's just, I mean, even sometimes there's even crazier storylines that start off on Friday, because you have all of these amateur teams that people are trying to predict, hey, are they going to make pool play? Are they going to get out into the open? But then you end up trying to watch through this really low quality Periscope application just to see a match, and you're just at home and you're looking at it and you're yelling through the phone trying to be like, yeah, I want to be there. I want to be a part of that crowd right now.
Yeah.
And it's a esport unlike any other, and I can't express how much I love it. And even after all these years, I still get the same feeling. I'm always so excited to not only go to the LAN and talk my trash and play my game and my heart out, but I'm also really excited to meet new up and coming players, meet players that have been around as long as I have, and just hang out with the Gears family. I mean, after all, we're a community. I mean, we might be crazy sometimes, but we're definitely happy and try to support each other as much as we can. So
that's awesome. And so leading up to those events, because like you said, that's kind of like the time where it's a gut check. Obviously, there's months of practice that go into that. So in my personal experience, I've seen, at least in the Scrim Discords and every now and then when I've subbed in on second accounts that people don't know I have for friends teams, I've got, it's like undercover boss in a way.
I think that's awesome.
So I've subbed in for some friends teams, and I've noticed that more so than the pro scene, amateur scrims are very volatile. And what I mean by that is they seem to be on a system where it's a best of 3. If you win the first 2 maps, then the scrim's done. You don't play the third map more often than not, right?
That is correct. And that's kind of a thing that I've actually been trying to talk to my team about recently, because, one thing that's a huge problem about the amateur scene, and I can also say there's been times where I've been prone to this myself, and again, I'm trying to make sure that it doesn't happen, is the definition of a scrim.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of amateurs don't understand what the hell that means. You're literally trying to practice, you're trying to preach new things, you're trying to do different techniques, try to learn different strategies you can do off of initials or different retakes. And one thing that I've seen through Gears 4 and 5 more than the prior Gears is that the scrims, I feel, at least from an outsider perspective, or even when I'm in game, are not being used correctly with time. You're really trying to develop your game, learn new things, nerdy angles, trying to figure out what's the best way to attack a neutral hill.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of amateur teams that, yes, they are volatile, where they only do a best of 3, and they feel like, hey, if we win 2, we're better than this team, and we don't want to go against them again. But it's a scrim. You're practicing.
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out, what strats and what techniques you can pull out at the land. You're not trying to sit there and win the scrim. I mean, is it cool if you get a few rounds and you win a scrim? Well, sure. But I mean, even if you got 5-0 in scrim or 5-3, it's more about what you're trying to apply, what you're trying to gain, what type of knowledge are you getting. And
it's about the growth, not the victory.
Exactly. A lot of amateurs think it's a tournament, but no, damn it, it's practice. You're trying to grow as a team and figure out where your flaws are, or even trying to figure out like what's the next step to get you that edge against the other team. And I don't think a lot of amateurs really understand that. And that's like step 1 of playing any esport. You have to realize that scrims, drills, all that stuff is extremely important. It's not about winning. The winning comes with great practice.
Yeah. So do you guys schedule your scrims in advance, or is it, okay, our whole team's on, let's go post in the Discord or tweet out for a scrim and see what we get?
We usually try to post ahead. We are part of multiple scrim chats on Twitter, as well as Discord. And I basically have my schedule up. It's been the same since Gears 5 started, which is Monday, Wednesday, 7 Eastern until 12 a.m. at night. And we usually just let anyone try to ask us first. We usually try to schedule for a 7 and a 9 and then an 11. That way we have usually a little bit of time in between to discuss where some of the things went wrong, write down notes. I constantly actually have a notepad here that I write in all the notes, all the rounds, where things go wrong, timestamps, so we can review it later. And usually we try to schedule ahead. The only thing that becomes problematic sometimes, though, is when you try to schedule ahead, sometimes you have teams that have somebody that's got to work late or something comes up. And when that falls through, then you're kind of scrambling to find a scrim. But at the same time, when those things happen, there are times where instead of trying to scramble to get another scrim, we'll just reset ourselves. We'll go back into a private match, try to find more angles, try to find more ways to play just by ourselves on a map. Because, again, going with the whole idea of scrims, it's practice. Going with drills, it's practice.
Yeah.
And actually, just recently, that was one of the biggest problems I had with one of my most recent teammates. We were trying to talk about how we need to make time to go into private matches and look for these nerdy angles, to do drills where it's like, take 2 lancers and try to shoot the one guy down before he chunks anybody. Those types of drills that make you a better team player, but also makes you more aware of what you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just believe that, worst comes the worst. If you do lose a scrim for some reason and you can't find one in a few minutes, just take your time, go over your worst map with your team, or go over just a different strategy.
Utilize your time.
Again, exactly. I feel like going back to the whole time and budgeting it, like we were talking about earlier, you have to know like a backup plan. You always have to have like an ace in your sleeve to be ready for if something is dismissed or something doesn't happen at a specific scheduled time.
Do you feel like that happens a lot where you're being caught off guard with a cancellation or something and you're struggling to find a use of that time?
I feel as of recent and late, it hasn't been an issue. I will say when Gears 5 first started, it kind of was, because all the teams were trying to switch rosters, try to figure out who they want to play with.
Yeah.
But then trying to grow up through the whole first quarter of Gears 5, I would say at the starting of it, it was kind of like that, because if you're an amateur team that's not well known, or you're trying to like build up your portfolio or your reputation, so to say, there will be times where unfortunately other amateur teams will ego you for scrims. They'll say, hey, let's play this time. But then they're like, oh no, we got a better one than you guys. And at that point in time, it's like, yeah, when we were first starting, it was harder. But since we went to San Diego and we ended up beating a few teams and got top 32, which again could be better, honestly, but it was still a pretty decent run for our first time as a full 5 going into Gears 5. We've been able to find scrims easier. And it goes back to that point where, like, I've been in the trenches. I know what it's like to be on a team that's undervalued by other teams and how that type of treatment can happen. So what I've been trying to do ever since we got back from San Diego is I'll call out for scrims, and usually whoever asks first, I'll book them, whether I believe that team is better than us or maybe worse than us. Because again, going with the idea of scrims, it's like, even if it's a team that you think might be less skillful, you can try new things on them, new strategies, and then again, you can apply them. And again, I mean, I think it's going to repeat itself a lot, but it goes back to that whole idea of time management. It's like, let's do a whole half of a map with just trying to cross people down with their lancers and pistols only, just to get better focus fire as a team. And it's just like these little drills and strategies that you can apply to any single scrim you do, but it really just relies on the mentality of how you're thinking, how the rest of your team's thinking, and how you can promote that message that, there is no time being wasted as long as you're utilizing it the right way with your team.
Interesting. So being that you've experienced these kind of things before, like you said, where teams will either beat you or just think, oh, that roster that you've put together is not as good as this roster, so we're going to go scrim this team. Do you think those egos are deserved? I mean, because I'm chalking that up to players and teams having egos. So do you think those egos are earned or deserved, or do you think it's some sort of weird, I don't know, a better word than delusion, that these amateur teams are getting for I don't know what reason, because we don't have game battles anymore. So
no, that's correct.
So since I in my, like, back in Gears 2 when I was competing, there was times where I got it, because the number one GB team, if I'm not on the front page, why are they going to want to pay attention to me? Or even still, there was that gap between like the GB teams and the teams that were going to events and competing on that level. So I understood when those kind of ego things, it was frustrating, but I understood when it happened. But now that we don't have GB and we don't have that sort of ladder, that's that realistic check on egos, where do you think this is coming from?
Well, I think some of it's carrying over from what we had. So Gears 4, of course, we did still have game battles and ladders constantly, where they could end up not only playing tournaments and ladder matches, but then on top of that, even with the pro circuit, each player had their own amount of pro points from whether they did tournaments or if they ended up doing lands, or even if they did like pro point matches.
So those fed into it, those pro points?
So I think that kind of fed into it, but I also feel like another part that feeds into it is just the mentality and idea of trying to get in people's heads, which is something that Gears has always been well known for, going out there, teabagging the opponent, yelling at them, things like that. I think there's a degree where people feel like, one, that they can use that type of stuff to be egotistical. But on the other hand, I also feel like it comes back down to the idea that some teams feel like going against a lesser skilled opponent or a higher skill opponent, like obviously you always want to try to go against someone that's better than you because you feel like that's the best way you're going to grow. But I feel like a lot of these teams out here are looking at who they believe are lesser skilled opponents and just being egotistical of them because they're like, oh, well, I've done my due. My team's grown and I'm not as bad as that team. So I'm just going to waste my time if I go against them.
Yeah.
And I think it comes back down to the whole conversation about time again, how you use it. A lot of these teams feel like it's a waste of time to go against a team that might not be as good as them or they assume isn't as good as them.
And the crazy thing to me is I've actually seen, because I've created one of the Scrim Discords and I've been in Scrim chats before on Twitter. So I've seen like a lot of the interactions taking place, and then like I've said, the undercover boss kind of things that I did in Gears 4. I've seen how a lot of those interactions took place, like I said. But then I've also seen some of those players who are egoing teams within the amateur group go and message me and go, hey, we're really good and we want a chance to scrim the best team in the world at the time. And I'm trying to be, respectful to the recent placings. So the best, so we, at the time we were the number one team undisputed in the world, and they're messaging me going, hey, like we think we deserve a shot. We can get around on you. And while I appreciate obviously teams reaching out to me, and there's a reason I leave my DMs open, people would actually get mad when I'd be like, hey, I appreciate you reaching out, but it has to be mutually beneficial. That's the point of practice. And unfortunately, a team like that, we could run anything we wanted to blindfolded, and there's more than likely a chance that we're going to get some kills in a round. That's Absolutely. Not practice. So, like, it's just so odd to me that there's this like, I can't think of the word now. I hate when that happens.
It's kind of like a mentality that they feel like they're allowed to go against you just because they deserve it, when really they haven't proven that they've really deserved anything. And I think that's kind of something that has been around since the new trilogy. It started with Gears 4 and 5. It's just delusional, honestly. A lot of these teams, like even my team, for example, yeah, would I want to go against Energy? Sure. But at the same time, do I honestly know as a player and where my team stands, do I think we really have a good chance at really making it mutual beneficial? Honestly, no. I mean, I hate to say that because I'm not trying to hurt my team or myself with that, but yeah. I'm just being realistic. And you have to be realistic in that regards because, it's usually, if you're a professional team, you should be scrimming against the other best teams that are out there. You shouldn't be, paying your dues by going back into an amateur pool and playing against a bunch of amateur teams. You and your team worked that hard to get to that stage of where you're at now. So why should you have to regress to go against a bunch of amateurs? Now, maybe if it's upcoming amateurs or teams that have went against other pros in like the PGL tournaments, 2K tournaments, and they actually showcase that they got something and they can maybe prove something, then sure. Maybe you take like the nibble and you go after that team and say, hey, we'll scrim you. But other than that, I mean, like, for example, my team, any team that's around our skill level, I don't think we honestly do deserve a chance to go against a professional team yet until we can prove that, we're that status, or we prove that we are able to bring something to the table where, like you said, you don't have to be blindfolded and you can go through all of us, actually bring some type of fierce competition to you that makes your team think, be thoughtful of the overall situation. So, and
at the same time, for you guys or for another amateur team, it's not going to teach you guys anything if you're just getting beat up across the board. Any kind of strategies or things that you could pick up on that end, you could do that by watching us in a tournament. You're not just watching the VOD of us running the very basics against you and it working because you're just losing the fights or we have better team fire or things like that. And I think that's what a lot of teams struggle to understand is once you get past that kind of, I think there's in my personal belief, and this is not an insult to any team out there, not you guys or any amateur team or any other pro team.
No worries.
I think there's a lot of skill gaps in the community. There have been for Absolutely. A while. And we've seen that even as far back, in the Gears 1 and Gears 2 days. there's always been these kind of skill gaps. It happens in all esports. And right now, it seems like there's kind of like this top three. It's probably changed a little bit recently in Gears 5 because of the way the changes to the game have been going. And we'll obviously talk about that more later. But consistently throughout Gears 4, there was kind of like this top 1 or 2, and then there was a little bit of a gap, and then there was maybe 3 through 6, and then there was a pretty big gap, and then there was 7 through 12, and then there was a pretty big gap, and then the amateur teams and so on. So I think teams don't recognize those gaps because they're so hungry to prove themselves. They're not thinking about how, if that gap's so large, you're not going to take anything back from that scrim other than, holy shit, they actually are that good.
Yeah, and that's a excellent point. I mean, I think as clear as day that makes sense. And if we were to really sit here and talk about it, it's like energy, reciprocity, those teams right now are up top. And, the only way that we should be able to go against those teams right now is meeting them in a tournament. Now, of course, with the new way and policies, that's not really possible because there's a pro league, which is great, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think that's the one thing that all teams have to consider. If you're sitting there and you know that these skill gaps exist in the game, why are you going to bother trying to go against someone who's way above your head when really you have to work with the people around you to try to grow and progress through that overall timeline?
Yeah.
Just like if you're trying to get a degree in school, you just don't enter college the first day and say, give me my degree, let me have it. It's like, no, you have to be there for the next 4 years and progress those levels to get to that overall goal.
Yeah,
and
you don't jump into that 4th year comp sci program class where you're learning and writing programs in a language you've never even heard of because you want to be a comp sci major. You start off with the basic maths and the basic comp sci and work your way up, just like any other kind of thing in life. You don't just jump into the deep end. So
yeah, but I mean, life is a progression, and esports isn't any different. Like, just growing as a team and getting better is a progression. And if you want the chance to go against that pro team one day, well, you better get your ass to the study, start filming, start learning things, take the extra time to watch like pros play other pros, see what they're doing. Because like you said, it's like if we went against you right now, we would get our asses kicked and we wouldn't learn a damn thing.
And neither would we. And like I said, the scrims have to be mutually beneficial. So let me ask you, you mentioned the pro league. Do you think that the pro league hinders the growth for amateur teams since there's not that chance of getting to play the top teams on, any given Sunday, like a 2K tournament?
I honestly, in my opinion, I don't think it hinders it at all, because the one thing I will give kudos to PGL about really quick is the way that amateurs can fight for multiple weeks to be able to have a chance at a pro league qualifier, to be able to get the last 2 spots against the 2 worst pro leagues or pro teams of that quarter before. I think that should honestly make the amateurs more hungry. And then on top of that, if I remember correctly, I believe it is the top 2 amateur teams at the end of that quarter before the event. I think they get their travel funded, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So there should be more incentive than ever if you're an amateur team to really go out there and fight and grow and grind, because, for example, maybe in Gears 4, I would run into Optic or Energy and be like, oh man, this is cool. I get to go against these guys, get 7-0'd, learn nothing, and just sit back and go back to the drawing board, be like, oh man, maybe next time. It's like, no, there's no next time until we prove ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think the way that this system is based is like, it's nice because you got all these amateur teams that are basically in what was the 2K going against each other now. And it's forcing us to go against similar skill gaps from those skill tiers that we talked about. And you're learning more from that, whether you know it or not, or it's subconsciously going on. You're learning more now than you ever did in Gears 4, because instead of going against a top team in the round of 32, now you're making it to the round of 16, the round of 8, because you're going against other teams you can actually learn from and grow from.
And it's more competitive matches, and you're getting more reps in, so that makes sense.
And I think it's honestly extremely beneficial. I know it's everyone's dreams to go against pro teams, but again, it's progression, and I think this forces some progression on all teams without them really realizing it. So I do think that part is beneficial.
That's definitely an interesting take. And I think that's the goal that PGL and the coalition were going for with this esports program. So obviously, like, it's hard for me to look at it objectively because I'm so far on one side of it. So it's interesting to be able to hear your perspective since you're getting to see it from an entirely different point of view. With the pro league in place and the different qualifiers, I feel like there's definitely a lack of tournaments in general. You know, we have our Emergence Day series that we get to play in on Tuesdays, today as of recording this, and you guys have Sunday tournaments, you know, for that are leading up to the events. Those give you the qualifier points for those top 2 spots that could give you travel coverage.
That's correct.
But do you think there's something else that the amateur scene needs or the Gears esports scene needs? You know, we lost our GB ladders, we lost our, you know, just regular match finder type of things. So is there something that you think we need?
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually brings up a good point with PGL. I mean, I'm going to, of course, try to keep it civil through the whole conversation, obviously, but there has been a lot of flaws and issues with PGL. And one of them being that right off the rip, when we ended up having this new online platform, you were supposed to be able to have Match Finder. You were supposed to be able to do basically what we did back in the GB days, where you would search for a match. It would show you all the matches available. You would click on one, and you would randomly be going against an opponent that wants to be able to host a match to go against you.
Yeah.
When PGL opened up, they had a match system, but it was one that was really problematic and brought on a lot of issues that we might discuss a little bit later today. And what that was instead of randomly going against a team, I could end up picking the team that I wanted to challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then that team would receive the challenge and they were able to either accept it or decline it. So right out of the gate, that's a huge issue because you would have teams that would literally try to feast on new teams or beginner teams just to get more points on the ladder. There was really not much skill growth because it was more just the higher skill teams trying to snipe the lower skill teams, and just repetitively over and over again, that's what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, I mean, the one thing that is nice is that after you go against a team once in that system, you can't go against them again for 3 more days is what it was.
Yeah.
But even that was kind of crazy. And then,
well, there was also a punishment, right? If you declined too many matches, you started getting punished points, I believe. Because I remember I got challenged by like 2 or 3 amateur teams, and I had a warning pop up as I'm like just like closing them off like bad DMs. And
yep.
And it's like, hey, by the way, if you decline too many of these, then you know you're going to lose points. And I'm like, well, what the hell is that about? We don't want to. We'd rather use that time to actually practice and improve at this game that we have to earn our money in. And
yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. There was some really wacky rules. There was you lose 10% of your points if you decline too many times. That was one. If you issued a challenge and the other team didn't respond to that challenge in 10 days, they lost 10%. Or if your team scheduled a match and the other team accepted the match, but you never played the match in the 10 days, you would both lose 10% of your points. So they were like all the different penalties that were going on when it came to accepting and declining matches.
That's insane. I didn't even realize that there were so many of those other things. Thank God we didn't. Didn't have to play it too much.
And I mean, you know, another reason why you can point at this and say, wow, what a horrible system, is because think about Hive, for example. They just finished top 4 in San Diego. They almost got snuffed out of the Pro League qualifiers because I believe they were like 9th or 10th on that ladder.
Mm-hmm.
And none of the teams above them were accepting any matches. They were literally saying, we're not going against you because if you beat us, then you might jump in front of us in the ladders.
Yeah.
And that's no damn way to have like the best of the best on the amateur scene, or at that time it was some pro teams that were down there fighting, you know, for their invitation to get there.
Yeah.
There's no reason that they should be limited to be able to prove themselves because everyone's just being a bunch of scared jackasses or because like they have the power to do that. That makes no damn sense.
Yeah, and I even heard that Hive was, and obviously I have no proof. This is speculation and rumor, but I heard that they were being blacklisted. It wasn't even just that the teams above them weren't playing. It was that they would challenge teams and the teams would say no.
No, that is not a rumor. That's actual facts. And I even had a whole conversation with Coach Crazy Train about it because, they're all good guys over there, great competitors, but there was literally a circle of like 10 teams above them that were completely blacklisting them. And then a lot of the teams below them were either, starting to kind of dwindle out and realize, oh, well, this isn't the run for us this time around. Or they were teams where even if Hive went against, they wouldn't have got enough ELO rating to get above the teams above them. So it was a real shit show, honestly.
And over here, I was making jokes about how we were going to earn a second spot and try to sell it, even though it, was against the rules. But it's so crazy. And the crazier thing is, I know that we're not inventing the wheel here in our community. These are things. A match finder is something that's been around in this community since 2007, 2008 at least. These online ladder and qualifier systems have been around for a decade easily. I mean, esports goes back way further than even just Gears esports. Counter-Strike was being played in the 90s. So, the road has been paved, and then we're choosing to walk through the dark forest and try to pave our own road with a wheelbarrow and a bag of cement mix, rather than going on this nice shiny highway that's been made for us. And so that's the part that I don't understand. It just seems like over and over again, decisions are being made to, rather than just follow an easy path that works, let's make it, unique to us and make it more Gears, and let's reinvent the wheel. And if that makes it more complicated, then so what? And
they really didn't need to. And I agree with that. I think it's absolutely ludicrous that we're trying to reinvent this wheel. We're trying to make all this different stuff work for us. It's like, look, there's been a true and tried system that we've been using for over a decade, if not more. Why are you trying to do something that is right there in front of you as the blueprint and make it your own? It works. Why if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, what are you doing?
And I think another thing that we're seeing is, along with, again, other stuff that I want to bring up in a later part of this podcast, but we're seeing a lot of, almost, it seems like there's like a lack of research behind decisions made or things that are stated. So, we're doing a pro league, and the idea behind the pro league, I would imagine, and then the also travel coverage for the top 2 amateur teams from actually a lot of regions. They do it for Europe. They cover Brazil, Asia Pacific, South America, Mexico. So there's a lot of teams, like a good portion in San Diego. I'd say, I don't know how many open bracket teams there were, but let's say there was, 30 teams in open bracket. Almost half of those were covered by the coalition to be there. So along with all the pro teams, along with the crazy prize split that we see in Gears esports that no other, esports scene sees, they're doing all of this to try to bring in more people, and yet we see the game slowly dying out, the number of competitors slowly dying down. Why do you think that is from an amateur perspective, that the numbers are starting to dwindle?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, the first reason is kind of what we were just talking about. Then trying to reinvent this wheel with PGL, we were told that this was going to be something that was beneficial, that this was going to be a great partnership. And again, not trying to be critically rude about it, but PGL has dropped the ball consistently, has created multiple issues, and has lost a lot of trust in this community, to the point where anytime someone brings up those 3 letters, they're making fun of it.
Yeah.
And it gets really bad because, like, for example, I think one of the first major blows to the overall amateur scene was when we ended up doing those ladders and we were trying to fight for pro league qualifier spots or whatnot after, I'm trying to remember, I think it was after Hive and them ended up qualifying, we ended up having another new bracket come up where we had to fight through things. And the one thing that happened was there was literally a team that was getting ready to participate in a tournament, and they ended up getting to that tournament because they made Smurf accounts ended up making, I think it was like a fake team on the PGL ladder, and went against them multiple times to get points accumulated to be in the spot to where they could be in the tournament.
So they were win trading with themselves?
Yes.
Okay.
And I ended up finding evidence on it. I called it out. Team banned from the tournament. I got a lot of flack for that from that team.
Of course.
But like that right there is like a huge trust issue. It's like if we expect you to run a $2 million circuit, but you can't even figure out that this team was literally going against a bunch of new Xbox Live default gamer tags, and you're not stipulating that they're cheating without someone bringing evidence to you, how the hell can we trust you with $2 million, whether we're pros or amateurs?
Yeah.
So one big issue is literally going from MLG to PGL. It's like, it's been a confusing process. Signing up for the website was hard for a lot of people. Some people didn't even understand how to get to the tournaments tab. We got a match finder that never existed. And I will admit that although they are currently working on it right now, and during Christmas break, they did have a match finder that was on their website, that match finder would break if one team scheduled a match and another team tried to search. It came back with a 504 service error, which is something that I wrote to them about during Christmas break. And of course, it didn't get back till January 6th because of holidays, and that makes sense. But it's just been, honestly, there's no nice way to put it. It's been an absolute shit show when it comes to the PGL Online. Like, their match finder's broken, their support's been really bad. Like, they ended up adding a chat feature on their website to now where you can click on a speech bubble and talk to them. Mm-hmm. But the quickest way to get a response from them is to email them. And again, that's something that's like not custom to newer generations or people. We want instant answers nowadays, but it's like they just have a lot of backwards policies, and it's really in shambles because there are honestly a lot of good things that they're trying to preach and do between PGL and Coalition, but the way that they're implementing it and trying to make it happen has been an absolute horror. And it's causing a lot of amateurs, even professionals, just absolutely annoyed with what's going on. And if it's this hard just to get going to compete in this circuit, that's already driving a lot of amateurs away, for one.
Yeah. Well, and we're seeing like a common trend too, not to cut you off, of
oh no, absolutely.
At least what it feels like, we're seeing anything involved with this current title, it feels incomplete. Whether it be the PGL website, it was pretty much incomplete. The esports program and rule book around that program was pretty much incomplete. I'm sure you've seen like gaps within the rules and vague points. I know I've exposed a lot of them within the pro community. The game itself feels incomplete. This most recent update was admittedly incomplete by their own, like they're on their own developer stream. So it's just so shocking to me that this is such a common trend right now within the last, the game's been out since September or, late September. We've had it for what? That makes it 5-6 months. And it's just this constant thing of being incomplete.
And I absolutely agree with that. I really wish I could sit here again as someone like you and a lot of the community who loves this game and franchise, but even an optimistic person myself at this point, it's like I said before, there's facts, there's rules, there's things I'm seeing that no matter how positive I try to be, even I can't really be positive because there is a lot of failures going on. And that developer stream was really the most recent crushing blow that not only hurt just the community when it comes to esports, but it hurt the brand overall. It literally hurt developers, casuals, everybody involved. It's just the way that they were basically saying, well, this is incomplete, and making the references that turn into memes with the Mario Kart thing, which honestly I laughed at a lot. There was a lot of funny things out there, but like, I know I shouldn't be laughing because I really care about this franchise, but it's got to a point where it's a pathetic state.
It's almost like a depressed laugh. Like if you don't laugh, then you're just going to cry. So
absolutely. That's exactly how it feels. And, it's like, it's one of those moments where I don't really care who you are in the scene. You are feeling hurt right now with all the bullshit that's happening.
Hmm. So I interrupted you briefly. You said there was you were starting to say number two. You had like a second thing that you were going to go on. You remember what it was?
Unfortunately, I talk way too much, as you probably noticed.
No, it's fine, man. I enjoy it.
I think number two, if I remember correctly, was again just being able to trust PGL on a second stance. So I wanted to bring this up to you because maybe you have a perspective on it that I don't. Because when I was at San Diego, let me say first off, the live production was pretty good. Like, I really liked what they did out there. They did a good job with the stations and everything.
Mm-hmm.
There was, of course, some drama and stories that flew around. For example, one of the very first games of the day in open bracket on Friday started, and one team won one round before the PGL person turned off the whole game, thinking that was the whole match.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So that happened.
We were in a player meeting and Benson brought it up to the PGL staff.
Yeah, so that was wrong. And that actually happened to one of my current teammates. I ended up recruiting a new teammate, and it was his team that actually went through that. So he was telling me all about it. But secondly, let me ask you this really quick.
Yeah.
I ended up talking to Alex the Great, and he, of course, was coaching Vision for that tournament. And when I ended up looking at how the bracket was shown on the PGL website, and then I compared to how the Swiss pool ended up playing out, we ended up catching what we believe was a huge mistake. So Vision went against Fire and Ice, I believe, at the tournament.
Okay.
And going off of the results they had in the Swiss bracket, and then going off of the diagram that they have on their PGL website of the championship bracket, it looks like they actually ended up putting Fire and Ice against DBL4, not DBL, OBL4, which is open bracket losers seed number 4,
okay,
which was Vision. But Fire and Ice was in Swiss Pool A. So in theory, they should have went against open bracket loser number 2, whoever that was. So I'm not sure if you noticed that or you heard about that, but
no, I didn't.
When I started looking back at that, I just, that's another situation where I was like, holy shit, did they really fuck up this bad? Because I had like my phone on site, I was looking at it, I was looking at the results, I was going back and forth, and there's been no explanation on that. Literally, these teams were supposed to be on the opposite side of the champ bracket, yet they go against each other right away on the wrong side. And no one's ever made a word about that. So going back to the whole PGL thing, like, I can literally sit here for the next 2 hours and tell you every single mind-numbing experience that I've had with PGL, whether it was at the event or more importantly on the online platform, all the stories I've heard, all the community members. Like, literally, I've been getting DMs constantly, people asking me about PGL stuff like I'm the one and only guru.
Like, and you work for them.
Yeah, like, that's because I read the rule book and I'm always trying to understand because, I'm a player, but in my mind, I also try to take on part of a coach role, even though, any team should have a coach, honestly. Yeah. But you need to always be ready for the rules and regulations. So I usually have a lot of the amateur teams and managers come to me and talk to me about this stuff. And the amount of things that have been missed or overlooked or screwed up has been just, I can't even explain it. There's like a whole novel you can write on it.
I get it. I mean, so a lot of people don't know this, but on Friday of the event, we had a player meeting, and it was based off of pretty much an outcry from the pro community on Wednesday and Thursday about the not being able to practice at the stations and the frustrations that we are already having. And this is after several months or I guess 2 months of pro league where we also had frustrations, and 1 month of qualifiers where everybody had frustrations, whether it be the website or the admins or whatever. After that meeting, I sat down with the CEO of PGL and with one of the directors of esports from the coalition and had a pretty much one-on-two conversation with them where I started just calling them out on some of the bullshit that I've seen, that I've experienced. And I started it with the administration team and their inability to understand the rules and how they apply to our community and how they apply to our game. And the fact that even throughout the pro league, I'm waking up every Sunday and arguing with a PGL admin because they don't know their own rules. or the fact that the rules were changed, and rather than it being told to us in some sort of understandable format, it's hidden in the middle of a paragraph on the third page of a 6-page document that were emailed.
Yep.
So, and it's important rules about who gets host online and things like that, who gets team A, who gets team B, and at a top level where it's the best players in the game on both teams, little features like that matter, and how you plan your meta game outside of the actual end game. So, and that's the stuff that I focus on. That's my job. So that's directly affecting me. And that's in the pro league. That's literally like where it should be, like perfection or as close they can get to that. So I can't even imagine what's happening to you guys where you don't have the luxuries that we have. You don't have the ability to cause as much of a stink on Twitter as we do when we don't get like the basics that we need to compete. So it's actually astounding to hear that at that event, there was a team pretty much put into the wrong pool, I mean, that changes a lot. You know, Vision's not a bad... I actually don't know what the roster was for San Diego or if it's the same roster as now, but I mean, who knows what maybe they could have gone off one day and beaten a team that they should have played rather than Fire and Ice or whatever happened. So that's actually insane to hear.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, I've been trying to find for just to make sure that I'm not losing my own marbles, but I mean, you know, they even have the results posted on PGL's website. Like, if you go there, go to the events tab, it literally has both Swiss brackets and then it has the champ bracket. Mm-hmm. And you can compare it to the graphic they have. It's absolutely wrong in that regards. And you
just don't match up?
No, they don't match up. And the one flip, if you made the one flip, it was like, okay, well, Vision's not going against Fire and Ice, and who knows who they would win against. I mean, I have it pulled up right now. I can try to take a look. So if it was Swiss Group B number 6, they would have won against either E-Storm, Freeburger, or EU's Finest instead.
Interesting.
So I don't know why that wasn't called.
Huh.
Yeah. And then
very
that
interesting.
means that on the other side of the bracket, it would have been Fire and Ice against... Let me see here. I got to pull it up really fast. So Fire and Ice would have won against the open bracket losers number 2. And that would have been... Rest in peace, Cancers instead. So you have like a whole bracket that would have been flipped if someone caught it, and they didn't. And again, like you said, who knows? It's any given event day. You never know who's going to go off, but like that could have drastically changed at least a few results.
Yeah,
but
especially since we're playing on a brand new update that was given to us on the Friday of the event. So, you know, that tosses a lot into the air. Yeah, and again, that's something we can touch on a little bit later. And then we were experiencing things like not knowing when we were playing. You know, not only were there matches starting at 10 a.m. for God knows what reason in West Coast time, nobody's going to be watching that. And I think the viewership showed that was a bad decision. And I mean, as a team, you know, we're not practicing at 10 a.m. We're not practicing to wake up at 8:30 and get ready and get to the venue. Like that's not something that we've ever had to do because of the way the pro league has been structured, or at least pro tournaments have been structured in the past with MLG. You know, our earliest matches would have been noon at the absolute earliest would have been noon. Now we're waking up at 8:30 a.m. to go play the number 1 team in Latin America, Ghosts, on main stage at 10 a.m. with 3 people in the audience. So little decisions like that were just astounding to me, and we're not finding out that time until 11:30 the night before. And the next day, we're not finding out when we play on Sunday until 1 a.m. the night before. You know what I mean? That might have been a little over dramatic, but it felt like that. There was just a lack of communication. It required a lot of us just pestering and asking questions, asking like who we played, when we played. And I think that all branches out to something that, again, we'll probably talk about soon, communication between them and us as a community.
Yeah, I mean, everything you just spearheaded with that conversation, I mean, it's not only amateurs, it's not only professional in the esports circuit, it's everyone that's been impacted by the irregularities of the overall process of PGL and their decisions. And I mean, honestly, all we want the damn thing fixed. We want to know when the matches are going off. We want things scheduled accordingly because, like you said, that drastically changes like your team's routine, how you react. And if you're used to what was an old system and now they're trying to throw a new one at you without any line of communication that's happening, how are you supposed to be able to be at your best?
Yeah, or at least not an efficient line of communication. Because in fairness, they told us it was just later rather than, some at a time that we could, if we went to an MLG event, we get an email weeks before that says, hey, matches on Friday start at this time. Media day for you is at this time. Matches on Saturday start at this time. Matches on Sunday will start at this time if you make it that far. So you have a pretty good idea of when you're going to be expected to be playing and get up. And I'm sure that if you want to do it, you can start working on your team sleep schedules and making sure they're adjusted for the appropriate times and so on and so forth. But it just seems frustrating that so much is so inefficient. And again, it's a reinvention of the wheel that we don't need. There's several games that I personally have experience in, and I haven't touched half of the esports world personally, but I mean, League of Legends has figured this out. Counter-Strike has figured this out. A completely different system, but they figured it out. You've now got franchising that has figured this similar system out. You've got other games doing open events that have figured this out. So why is it that we're still struggling to figure this out when there's so many role models ahead of us that's already done it? I just baffling.
Mean, we had one of the best in MLG that was doing it for us, and that's the other sad part about this whole equation. If you compare what we had in terms of professionalism and communication back when we had MLG doing Gears 4, and you compare it to what we have now with PGL, it's just a vast difference for the worse. And I mean, I've even heard some people compare it to PGL being a grassroots organization at this point. And I mean, honestly, how can you really blame them? There's been so many balls dropped from them that you can't really defend them.
Yeah. Now, I will say, as you say, you can't defend them. In their defense, it's not just PGL. It's a joint effort, and I think a lot of people. This is why I want to say this, because it's not just PGL who do the entire esports program. It's a mixture of the coalition and their esports team, PGL and their staff, and then their partners who they use for the website operations and web development. And so things like a match finder and the website not working correctly, that falls not on PGL or TC, that falls on the website partner that's dropping the ball. And then things like the administration staff not knowing what the fuck they're doing, that falls on PGL. And then the rule book not being updated properly and being explained properly, that falls on the coalition. So it's a joint effort. Unfortunately, it's not working right now. And to be fair, it's slowly getting better, slowly being the key word. But I want to clear up that misconception for anybody who might be watching, because a lot of people just go, well, this is PGL's fault, and fuck them. It's not just PGL.
No, and it's great that you identify that, because I mean, there are honestly a lot of people that make that incorrect gesture that it's all PGL. And I mean, going for another example of kind of a combination of PGL and the coalition making a mistake. One of the weeks that we were doing our Challenger Point standings qualification, what PGL would do is they would look at the website, just the Gears of War website normally, because they were updating the pro points on their website for the time being, because they don't have that functionality on the play.gears GG website.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was the coalition didn't update the points from week 3 to week 4. So basically all the seeding points that all these teams should have had going to week 4 now vanished. And PGL ended up using basically the same exact point system that they had in week 3. So there was a lot of teams that were in the wrong seeds. And again, me keeping track of this with my Google spreadsheet of all the points, I sent it over to them, I submitted, and I was like, look, you got the wrong points, the wrong seeding's happening. And by that time, it was already too late. But that goes back to that whole communication and collaboration, where it's like they were depending on one another and they failed because they didn't carry out the specific task that that sector or that, overall group had to get done in order for things to work out accordingly.
And this is two groups of people who it's literally their jobs to do this, whereas you, who is doing it out of passion and love for the game and the community, are doing it in your spare time, which you have very little of based on the crazy schedule that you've told me you have, and you're still managing to do it better than they did, and you're able to communicate that to the teams better than they did. So
and there's no way it should be like that. I mean, we all
absolutely.
know that, honestly.
Yeah, no offense to you, but that shouldn't, like, they should have a glorified version of what you have. It should be pretty and sparkly and on every single website they could possibly have. You know what I mean? So it's just, it's so crazy that we have all of these difficulties. And I think that's something that this podcast is really showing me. It's not something that we're just experiencing as a pro team or as a pro community. It's something that we're experiencing as an esports community as a whole.
Yeah, it's definitely a whole.
So two of the things I want to talk to you about, we've kind of covered, and that's one, we've been ranting about the different difficulties of the current esports program, and we've touched a little bit on the current like path to pro. It was something that I talked about a lot in my Gears 4 streams. I used to make fun of the two tunings. Whenever somebody would ask me what I thought about core and comp tunings, I would say, if you're a person who picked up Gears of War because you saw it being played at some MLG event and you're like, ooh, that game looks cool, blood, guts, gore, fun, I'm going to go shoot my gun. So you go buy it and you hop on the game and you have to play social. I don't know if you ever experienced that or if you ever made a brand new account near the end of Gears 4, but they changed it. You actually were forced to play social matches up until a certain like profile rank before you were allowed to jump into the ranked experience, which means core. It means game modes that's not what you saw your favorite players playing all weekend, and it's trying to gently introduce you to the Gears universe and hold your hand so that you can get kills and feel special. So then you have that experience. You're getting kills. You think you're kind of good. You get to the point where you're able to go play ranked and play what you saw Mental and Explosive and Franchise and Icy and all these people playing, and you hop into a ranked escalation match, and now you're wondering why you can't get kills, or why the rules are different than any of the other game modes you've experienced. This isn't King of the Hill. There's 3 hills now. What is this? So you've got to refigure out those rules. You've got to figure out why your guns aren't doing the same amount of damage as you were doing before. And then let's just say you push past that point and you're like, okay, I've gotten good at ranked. I'm winning most of my ranked matches despite having horrible teammates because, the matchmaking system sucks and I'm diamond and I'm getting bronzes on my team. Whole other issue. How do I go pro? And there was no clear defined path for little Timothy, who got this game after watching the event one weekend and struggled through all that other shit. There was no way for them to know how to go pro other than just, hey, pay a lot of money that you probably don't have unless you are a working human. But, say you're 17 like I was, or even younger when I was going to Gears 2 events, and you're going off your parents' money and going to these events, that's it. That's the only way to go pro. Because in League of Legends, I know if I go grind a challenger, I'm going to catch somebody's attention. Even in North America, where it's kind of a joke, I can go get to this rank within the game and I'm going to get noticed. And then I can maybe get on an NACS team and I can play in these amateur tournaments and I can go into the farm system that the Pro League has and work my way up. So Gears 5 addressed that. You're in those trenches of how they've chosen to fix that whole issue. What do you think of it? Do you think it's successful? I mean, we're about to see our first kind of use of it since we're going through relegation right now this coming Sunday. Do you think it's useful?
I think it is successful, but I mean, the only minor concern I have is just, again, communication when it comes to it. I think one of the things that Gears Esports and Coalition and PGL did well is, again, if you read through the rule book they have, again, even though they updated it later and they should have warned us when they did that, but they have the stepping stones to be able to read through the book, realize where you're going to go or what steps you have to take in order to get there. Mm-hmm. And I think it makes the overall tournaments every Sunday more enjoyable to watch and more competitive. I think teams know or got a better idea that they have to grind and be able to fight and claw their way during every Sunday when they have the tournament. But when it comes back down to it, I mean, at the end of it all, I think it's going to be a good thing. I'm really excited to see this Saturday coming up, which teams are going to qualify to get into the last 2 pro spots. Mm-hmm. I feel that between the 2 teams we did have, that one was Gods, which they disbanded and the other one was Free Burger, which is a whole other conversation we could have because there is drama going on with that right now.
Yeah, I saw. Let's go ahead and talk about it since some people who watching or listening to this might not know.
I will talk about it 1 second.
Okay.
But what I will say is that I think it is a good system to a degree. I think we're going to end up seeing Oxygen Supremacy and Vision probably make the Pro League qualifier and end up being in the pro circuit. I'm pretty confident Oxygen Supremacy will get in there. Vision is kind of like a dark horse, I'm guessing on, to be honest. But the problem, going back to the Pro League qualifier right now, the problem with the Pro League qualifier was there was 12 teams that ended up competing in it. And the way that the rule book is laid out for the North American Pro League qualifier is that the 2 teams that finished the worst in their division. So we have North America Alpha and North America Bravo. Mm-hmm. The 2 teams that finished the worst in those divisions, which was Gods and Free Burger, they get relegated, and they basically have to fight through the trenches of upcoming amateur teams that could take their spot. So we ended up losing Gods, and they were automatically disqualified. So PGL ended up adding the next team on the ladder, which was Goated. And Goated, I believe, is HBM Perfections, Birdie's team, and they picked up some of the guys from an amateur team that was Optimum Gaming.
Okay.
And they made it in. So you end up having all these teams playing. But the one thing that happens, first off, is that there's a team called Goonigans that made it into the Pro League qualifier.
Based off points. And
yeah, even amateurs like me, a lot of us were like, okay, well, how did they get here? We're actually kind of surprised. And the reason they got there was because, again, going back to PGL issues and situations, the very first week of the overall fall quarter or winter quarter that happened, mind you, most of the teams had no idea what was happening. There was literally only, I think, like 20 teams that signed up for the first week of the qualifier that went towards this tournament.
Okay.
So you end up missing like teams like Parallax, Vision, Oxygen Supremacy, all these teams that made it,
like the top
ended up getting a late start.
Yeah.
So Goonigans was actually a team that was on every single week. So they accumulated enough points just from that alone to make this qualifier. Now, what happens, though, is that Goonigans doesn't even show up. They don't participate in the tournament at all. They're not there. I believe the team disbanded. So
of course,
they're in this tournament for a Pro League spot, but they're not there. And the format for the overall Pro League qualifier is a Swiss bracket where you end up playing 4 different games against other teams that are in this qualifier. Mm-hmm. So there was 4 different teams that went against Goonigans. Mine was actually one of them. There was Money. I'm not sure Money made. Basically, though, there's 4 teams that went against Goonigans, got the free win. But here's where the whole situation gets really crazy. So basically, they have 4 different tiebreakers because at the end of Swiss pool, you're going to end up having the same amount of wins as probably a few other teams. So they need to have tiebreaker procedures to be able to say who gets what position.
Yeah.
So the top 5 was solidified because 1 through 4, I believe, had 3 wins or more.
Okay.
Number 5 was, I think, Quantum Gaming, and they were in 5th because out of the teams that all won 2 matches, Quantum Gaming was the only one that went against another team that had 2 wins in Money May. So they had what was known as a second tiebreaker, which was the head-to-head fight. So out of all those teams, which was Quantum, Money May, Free Burger, and I think Rest in Peace Cancers, they were the only 2 that went against each other. So Quantum got 5th. So then you get to the 6th spot, which is the last spot to make. And the problem was that Money May and Free Burger, they were basically in a deadlock. So you end up having the 3rd tiebreaker, which is map count. And then the 4th tiebreaker is round differential. So the issue here is that Free Burger went against a team that forfeit. So do they get 2 maps won to their credit because that team forfeit? Or was that scored differently because that team wasn't there? And even if you do say, yeah, they get 2 maps won, how do you count round differential in that? Do you just give them 10 free rounds because that's what it would have been if they played? Or how is that scored?
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the equation, you have Money May, who ended up going against Parallax Gaming, I believe, in round 3. And again, I could be wrong with this information, but from my understanding, Parallax Gaming didn't play at all round 3 or 4. They literally split up as a team after round 2.
Okay.
It didn't play the last 2 teams. But if you go to the PGL results, it says that Money May beat Parallax 2-0, unlike when Free Burger went against Goonagans, and it said that they had a W and Goonagans had an F for forfeit.
Yeah.
So the question then comes down to, okay, let's assume that Free Burger ends up getting the 2 wins from Goonagan for map count. Both of those teams would have still been at a 5-5 map count deadlock. So then it goes down to round differential, which, again, this is a flaw, but when you go to submit your scores in PGL, you type what map it was and you type like the round count that your team had.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could submit proof in there, but at the same time, you don't necessarily have to submit proof like MLG or Game Battles had.
Yeah.
Where they had like a little upload button, you could do all that. So now we're down to this 4th tiebreaker. And what evidence did both of these teams collect, or what number count is PGL going off of? How is PGL scoring the forfeit team? How can you score a team that went against a team that literally forfeit their matches from round 3 on, but in the scoreboard it says that they were there?
Yeah.
So that 6th spot is beyond anyone's control other than PGL, and they ended up siding with Money May for evidence, that I don't honestly know. I was talking to both teams trying to see if I could figure out VOD and stream and do the round count myself. But at the end of the day, it's caused another heartbreak, because without proper communication, we don't know how they ruled that stuff. You have 2 teams that are utterly confused about why one made it, why the other didn't make. And then you end up having that Free Burger squad, which is a lot of hardworking players that I've known from the scene, like Dylan and Matt.
Yeah.
And I know they got full-time jobs, and here they are trying to do their best to make the Pro League. And this just comes down to this really last tiebreaker situation that no one gives clarification for, but instead they just switch the 2 names and call it a day.
And you think they could do something easy, like say, okay, this next week, before matches play, we need your 2 teams on to play a tiebreaker, or sometime during this week, and submit proof. And it's a best of 3. We'll do pick and bans with one of our admins in Discord, and you play the maps, and that seems very easy to do.
I think it should be like a wild card, and just like a one and done. It's like, here's your best of 3. You 2 teams tied in map count and round count, but we also made the mistake that one team forfeit, this other team didn't forfeit. So to make it up to you all, we're going to give you one playoff round here to play a best of 3 before this happens.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that will come with its own repercussions, where we will feel like we righted a wrong for Free Burger in the situation. But then on the other flip side of that, Money May, I'm sure, would be very upset by that. And that comes back down to, as a competitor, being a good competitor, understanding where the situation's at. Because, again, if the tables were turned, you, as the team being in that situation, would hope to have the chance to be able to prove yourselves.
Yeah.
But a lot of times with life and with esports in general, if you get the edge, you're going to, of course, say, oh, no, nothing's wrong. This is our spot. Get away. Well, and I feel like that's what's happening.
But this isn't just some online tournament. And so, I would completely understand why Money May would be upset if PGL came out and said, hey, we're going to make you guys play to decide who moves on to next Saturday's tournament for the final qualifier. But at the same time, we're talking about a minimum, assuming that they go to next week's qualifier, and assuming that whichever one of these 2 teams qualifies, which Free Burger was in the Pro League before with a different roster, albeit, and they didn't do well, albeit, but they were still there. They qualified before. Assuming that one of these teams qualified, we're looking at thousands of dollars. You've got a $5,000 minimum just for qualifying for the Pro League, on top of your travel coverage guaranteed. So that's another, let's just say $2,500. So that's $7,500. Then you're one best of 3 at the event away from being in the money, assuming that the prize pool breakdown is similar in Mexico as it was to San Diego. So again, that's another $5,000. So now you're looking at like $12,500 on a best of 3. I feel like that's worth it, because that's a lot of money that could be going to, in theory, the wrong team, assuming that they qualified.
Yeah, it's an absolute big swing, and it just comes back down to the fact that we need a way to be able to administer these matches better, or we need some type of official ruling. I mean, it's kind of like, for example, how we went out to San Diego, like you said earlier. We ended up getting told when we sat down at 9 o'clock in the morning at open bracket stations that, oh yeah, this game is on a new update. And it's like, okay, same thing here. It's like there's a lack of communication. It's like, can you please tell us, to the public and those that are interested, how this tiebreaker broke down so we can once and for all lay it to rest? Because if you're not going to do that and you're not going to be transparent, then all of this assumption and possible drama is going to pop up like it is right now. And the sad part is we don't know who's right or who's wrong, because they have the data or they have the information. Maybe Matt streamed it. I heard he recorded all the matches, but who knows how long Tristan did it. Yeah. And again, it just goes back to the whole, like, who's going to dig through all that to get to the truth? And, you know, it's just, it should have never happened. It should have been administered better. There should have been a check-in system for the Pro League qualifiers, because, for example, if Goonigans wasn't there and they didn't check in, then they're just axed out of the tournament and you got 11 teams going against each other, or maybe you add a last team from the ladder. I mean, there's a lot of protocols and precautions they could do, but again, they're trying to reinvent the wheel and they're missing some of the obvious parts of the solid foundation we've seen before in other organizers.
It sucks, man.
It does. It really does. And that's a nervous laughter, because it's completely chaotic and fucked up. I mean, that's the only way to describe it.
And avoidable. So far, every single thing I've seen, and I said this in my reaction to their development stream video, every single thing that I've seen go wrong could have been avoided if it had been communicated. Somebody in the esports community, somebody in the montaging community, somebody in the Gears community could have said, a large voice of the Gears community could have said, don't do that. That's going to suck. But here we are, still experiencing these things, like we're not trusted, like we don't know what we're saying or what we're doing. And albeit we don't develop games for a living, but we do play them for a living, at least a good part of us. And, you know, there's other games where content creators are playing that game for a living, even if they're not pro. So assuming the game was big enough, you could consider content creators as people who doing it for a living that aren't the pro community. So I just, it's so shocking to me that it's happening. It's like we're getting attacked on multiple fronts by this like wall of suck.
It's a huge ass wall of suck, and then on top of that, I mean, I think the icing on the cake is the fact that professionals like yourself and amateurs like myself and casuals, we're all playing a goddamn beta still.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get any worse than that. I mean, so you're telling me we basically were playing what felt like a goddamn alpha when the game first came out, and now we're finally making it to the beta stage? I mean, that just brings question of, why didn't you delay the game? Yeah, would it hurt marketing and PR? Maybe a bit, but all of us in Gears of War want a fucking solid game, not one that's broken down, incomplete, and one that, like, when you play, you don't have fun.
Yeah, like, and even speaking of hurting marketing and PR by delaying it, I mean, I think I saw on Twitter that Final Fantasy today came out and said, hey, we're not done. We want to delay it. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty, because I didn't read the whole post, but they said, we're not done. We want to make this game fucking awesome. We're delaying it. We're sorry, but hopefully you understand that we're doing this for you guys. And everyone was like, you know what? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I'd rather get the full product and get this amazing thing that you've created for my favorite universe than get shit. So thank you.
I mean,
thank you for the transparency.
Yeah, and I really wish they would have done that, because like there's so many people in the community that pointed that out, and like the comparison that you can give in this situation, of course, is a kind of random reference, but the original prototype of the Sonic movie that was coming out, and how horrifying he fucking looked like. Yeah. That is Gears 5. What we wanted was the rendition of that, but we're stuck with the piece of shit that is going to creep your kids out, if you have any, for the rest of their fucking lives.
That's
and
actually
it's
amazing.
bullshit.
That's an amazing comparison too, because now you're looking at, I mean, this is a Hollywood multi-million dollar, probably more budget of a movie that was pretty much done. I mean, when they start releasing those trailers, like they're near the end of being done most often. And they were
Then
like, scrap it.
You have like literally a whole community fucking change their minds because they said it sucked.
Yeah.
And there was issues with it.
That's crazy. And they can do it. And they did it. So it's just, I mean, an example that's closer to home. Look at Call of Duty. Look at what CDL did. CDL had this amazing program that they believed was amazing, for not me calling it amazing, that was going to be their franchise league program where they're going to have people traveling all over the world for all these different cities doing these matches like they're professional sports teams, but they're Call of Duty teams. And the Call of Duty leadership group of all these owners were like, that's not what COD is. Like, let's not get too far away from our roots. Let's have tournaments. Let's make these weekends more exciting rather than just casual matches. Let's not exhaust the players by flying them all over the world every single week of the year. Let's make it Call of Duty. Let's not try to make it Overwatch or one of these other games that we're not. And they went, okay, let's refocus our efforts. Let's figure this out. After post announcing everything, every single date, every single match, post announcing that, they changed it all and they've revamped it to what the Call of Duty community wanted. And now everybody's happy.
It's going to pay dividends.
Exactly.
And obviously so, because again, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And they were trying to do that. And when they were told, hey, you're taking too many cookies from the cookie jar and you're fucking things up, they listened up and they were like, okay, you know what? We're in the wrong. We want to bring what the community wants because that's who we're catering to. And that's like who we want to see succeed and have fun playing this game. So like we can throw examples all night. I just think at the end of the day, we're all flabbergasted because we don't know what the hell happened here.
Yeah. And shout out to Jack Felling because she's doing the CDL and she used to do Gears. So God bless you. We miss you.
Absolutely.
It's crazy to me. Really? So I'm going to jump ahead to talking about the recent stuff that's been going on within the Gears community, since we've been hinting at it a lot that we want to talk about it. We've been kind of touching on it a little bit. Let's kind of get into it a little bit about all of this. So obviously, and I want to clarify this, so I'm going to talk a little bit. A lot of people misconstrued my video and the intentions of my video, and you watched it, so you can give me your thoughts after. But from our perspective, what happened was we were presented a brand new version of the game and told that it was slightly different, not noticeable at the event. The first day of the event, after not being allowed to play the game at all on Thursday, as per normal and per usual for us over the last 3 years. So something was off. We knew it. Then we get told about this and we're like, okay, holy shit. And we got to adapt. We go through the event, we come home, we see the patch notes, and the patch notes are pretty dramatic changes. For a while, the pro community, at least a lot of the pro community, have been asking for strafe speeds to be increased. And the reasoning behind that is we want there to be more than one viable way to play the game. If I want to get on and I want to just strafe, I shouldn't be punished because I'm strafing. I should be punished because I'm getting outplayed. So right now, if you don't wall bounce, you're at a disadvantage. That's just cold and cut. Like, that's how it is. So that was where our asking for the movement speed increase in terms of the strafe speed was. But rather than just doing that and saying, okay, so respectively, the strafe speed is now faster, they increase everything. So it doesn't matter if you make that faster because everything's faster. So their development stream was where they told us all to go to ask our questions and to talk to them about specifically the movement, because everyone was pissed off on Twitter and had been for weeks with no reply other than, we're doing a development stream, come talk to us there. So we show up. The viewership for that stream doubled its average from the week before. It went from 400 and something the week before to the 900s because of the esports community, where we're all asking, what the fuck, basically. What is this? How did we get here? Can we revert it? Stuff like that. Now, from what I saw, the first spam that was in the chat from the esports community was somebody, I think it was Kenny, asking, press 1 in the chat if you want it to be reverted, which is like a Twitch chat way of doing a poll and showing numbers. So I get that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And obviously the chat filled up with ones. The spam, I understand why that's in a way immature. As somebody who, you know, I'm a logical thinker, I get why that can be seen as immature. At the same time, spamming a Twitch chat that we were told to be in with questions. I mean, obviously there was the spam of hashtag revert, and I might get the timing of these wrong, but I believe a lot of the spam that I was seeing was also questions that weren't being answered, despite us being told to come to the stream and talk about it. And rather than talking about that difficult subject, they're talking about an Easter egg that, frankly, nobody gives a shit about. At least in this stream, 50% of this stream's viewership is here for the esports thing. So, and the movement. So it seemed like they were dodging and avoiding. And then when they started answering the questions, they didn't actually answer, can we revert? They didn't actually answer the core of what we were looking for. It was the PR answers. So people are thinking that, you know, as an esports community, we've made the game the way it is, and that's not true. We've given a lot of feedback. The pro community specifically has given a lot of feedback that wasn't heard. Yes, I've personally gone out to Vancouver twice, as a content creator once and as a pro coach once, and a lot of the feedback we gave wasn't heard. Some of the changes were in terms of like escalation itself. And then the second time, you know, we were playing on a pre alpha, so there's no way for us to know, you know, the ranking system wasn't going to work and all that crap. So when I make my video, it's a cry out to the coalition to talk to us. And I felt like I made that message pretty clear, but a lot of people construed that as I lost the most recent event, and so it's no longer financially beneficial to me. And I wasn't talking about this in Gears 4, and I'm just crying because I can't adapt. And I think that mindset, or that inability to actually hear the message of my video, because I went back and watched it to make sure, is part of the problem. Like, it's part of that communication problem that we're having. And I think that my point for people who didn't get it is, as a pro community, as an amateur community, as a content creator, or a casual or a hardcore casual fan, and I say casual not in a disrespectful way, I say casual as in you're not playing for money, you're playing because you love the game. That, to me, that's casual. Just like I no longer professionally make donuts. I casually make donuts in my kitchen. So I think that we all can come together and find a proper balance for this game, something that makes everybody happy. That's my personal belief. But I think it's important that we're not at a civil war with each other, because we've already got this war, and I hate using the word war because of all the shit that's been going on lately, but we can't be fighting each other, because we've got to fight on the front with the coalition right now. That's more important, and we have to worry about that one. So I just, that's a long rant, and that doesn't branch into a question for you. I just had to get that out there. So sorry.
It was all good, and I'm happy to hear that you said that. I mean, I don't need a question there. I'm just enjoying listening to what, you know, your feelings are and what you're thinking, because I think it really does reflect with a lot of other people in the community as well.
So thank you. You're very vocal in the amateur community. Are you guys experiencing and seeing the same? Because I admittedly don't follow enough of the amateur as I should on social media. Are you guys experiencing and feeling the same things that we are feeling as a pro community? Like, are the complaints that I'm seeing us tweet about, are you guys talking about them as well?
Yes, we are talking about them, and actually, the very second that Dylan, I believe, Eternity, started doing the Mario Kart meme and talking about that, a lot of amateurs jumped on board with that immediately, because we also feel the same way. We feel like that there's a lot of times that the developers at the coalition are jumping ahead of themselves without fully thinking it through. Like you said, for example, they changed the strafe speed. That's like all we were asking for, but they ended up changing all these other things with it. And my concern now is, you know, they're already talking about the next update they're going to the game, and they're talking about fixing Nasher registration. But if you kind of think back to it, it's like the Nasher so far has actually been hitting really well.
Yeah.
But ever since this last update, it's been messed up. So what you're trying to tell me now is that you have a whole community, or a lot of people in the community, mind you, that are upset about these last changes that ended up breaking the guns registration from what it was hitting. And now you're saying that you're going to patch another update on top of that to fix that, when really the solution is listen to your community. It's not just the esports players. It's not just us. It's casual players that have issues. It's basically horde and escape content creators having issues. It's literally everyone that plays this game right now is upset with some type of state. But the movement state and strafe as an esports community, yes, the amateurs are feeling it as bad as the pros are, and we're vocal about it constantly. I mean, maybe I try to go about it in a way where I try to stay optimistic but give constructive criticism.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's not hitting home either. It's literally just going right over the heads of the developers. No one's listening to it. And it kind of sadly goes back to the one meme that you can see on a lot of Twitter, where it's literally Node Zero just with his fingers in his ears saying, I'm listening. Like, that's really how the community is feeling right now. And it's not just your pros, it's everybody, not even esports. It's everyone's included. Everyone's got a lot of issues with this game. And we're constantly wondering, why are you trying to change this game in all these different ways when really you only have to fine tune it? We were at a fine tuning stage, at least in my opinion, but now we're completely off the goddamn board again. And it's like, I don't know if it's like pride of like, you know, we really do love this game and we make this game and, you know, we know what's best for it because we're developers, or if it's like something else that's just knocked them the wrong way, like backlash from amateurs calling them out, because there are some amateurs tag them and cuss them out, and that's not the way to go about it either. That's not professional.
Yeah,
I know we're hurt as a community. I know we're upset. I know we're pissed, but you still have to somehow try to say things in a way that's constructive. But then again, the flip side of that coin is there's been a lot of people that have been constructive, and we usually get one-word answers, or we get ignored when we ask questions, or they beat around the bush. And that's just as disrespectful as if someone is yelling at them about something. So it's literally everyone. It's not just us esports folks. It's everyone is being affected by just the non-communication that the coalition developers have. And it's not that we're trying to berate them. We're not trying to go out there and, you know, riot with pitchforks and all that good stuff. I mean, it feels like it's to that point because we've been playing an incomplete game this whole time. We've been going through all this issues, whether the rank system's been broken from multiple updates to where they end up putting something in the shop that shouldn't even cost money with the curb stomp or whatever happened a few months ago. It's just, they're constantly trying to do all these things, but I mean, there's no polite way to really say it. They're just failing. They're falling short, or they're making quick decisions that make no sense without consulting their player database. I mean, it's literally, it does feel like that not only are all of our communities in Gears fighting, so if you're a montager, content creator, esports competitor, casual, it's literally like a huge riot right now going between all of us. But really, it's what you said. It's like in times like this, we have a bigger person we have to talk to here as an overall community. Us, hundreds of thousands of players, and maybe even a lot less now because of everything that's happened, honestly. We don't know the numbers, but we all need to kind of bind together and try to find a civil way to approach it and speak as one loud voice rather than thousands of voices, because it's to the point where it's like you want to keep believing, you want to keep loving the franchise, but at the same time, you just feel like you're constantly ignored and that you're just being left out there without any type of information. And that really sucks. Communication is everything when it comes to a game, a franchise, something you love. And it just feels like that we've been talking to a wall the whole time, and that's just not acceptable.
And I think these rifts in our own community, specifically between like the esports side and the casual side, are almost caused by the rift between the community and the coalition. So a prime example is this update comes out and there's a ton of people in the casual community who enjoy Gears, enjoy this update. Hell, they want it faster and are fine with this and happy. And they're mad at us because we're out there being vocal and complaining and bitching and doing all these things, like in their eyes, entitled kids, because it's not going the way their direction that we want it, and they think that we've been, in Coalition's ear this entire time pulling the strings, when realistically that's not true. And so, we're frustrated because they ask us for feedback and then it's not heard, and that's then like what we give them feedback on is things like the movement. It's almost like the opposite is done. We want it a little bit slowed down. They speed it up. And that makes the casual community mad at us because we're going, well, what the hell? Why did you ask us and we say slow it down and you speed it up? And the casual community feels like their voice isn't heard because they think everything is only coming through us when a speed up is not something that we asked for. So clearly that's something from their side. So it's just this kind of circle of like mistrust and miscommunication that is like causing all these rifts, and it sucks to see because I skipped Gears 3. I bowed out because I didn't like the game, and MLG dropped it as a game from their circuit. But in my memory of Gears 1, Gears 2, Gears 4, and Gears 5, and Gears UE, if you count that, this is probably at like the kind of worst that I've ever seen it.
And I really hate that I have to say it, but I agree. And that kills me. That pains me to even say that, because we had so much potential going into Gears 5, but ever since it's been released, it's never been complete. It never really had a chance to be as successful as it should have been, because, whether it was rush or whatever point you want to make, because there's so many you can choose from in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, again, it's been a horrible experience. It's been a shit show. And when it comes down to it, the people that are still playing this game constantly are either the people who really have the drive, the love, and the passion because this is a franchise they grew up with and they know, inside and out, or it's a lot of kids that are getting it on Game Pass right now, getting casual pass. And it's just like, at the end of the day, you don't want to say it's the worst because it should be the newest and greatest, and it should have upgraded and updated everything that we took from 4 and learned to be better on 5, but nothing at all has delivered. It's just been smoke and mirrors is the best metaphor to give right now.
Yeah, and it's like when I was at the Coalition for the content creator for the TCA partner visit, like a couple weeks before the game came out, that was when I recorded my episode of Ashcast with Ryan with Node Zero. And at the time, I said that Gears 5, and I stand by this, that Gears 5 has the potential to be the best Gears of War game of all time. And at the time, I think I even said that it is, keeping in mind that I was playing only private matches on the original version of the game. And so it felt at that on LAN setting, so it feels like the best game of all time. And all I'm hearing from them, in their presentations is, here's all this amazing content that we're going to have so you can earn all this amazing content. And the replay value is there because it's going to be this grind for all these things that you can unlock and earn. And we did away with the RNG pack system, and now you can just buy what you want, which is what you guys are asking for. Obviously, we're not seeing prices for things or anything like that, any of the fine details that ruined all of these things. And there's going to be, I'm talking to Ryan, there's going to be this matchmaking system that's very complex, but it's supposed to work really well. And we've worked with the people from 343 and Halo to get this awesome rank system that's going to be really cool. And we're adding in leaderboards for Master. So all these things that were like on my checklist of like, I wants from Santa Claus, I'm like, okay, cool. I've got this. You're adding that? Okay, dope. I'm adding that. I'm adding that. This is going to be a fucking amazing Gears game. And then we get here and the prices are too high, and the unlockable content is literally dirt because it's a desert camo, so it's supposed to look like dirt. And the ranking system doesn't work. The matchmaking system doesn't work. I'm pretty sure if you and I go queue right now with 3 other people, we won't find a match. And it's just, and now we've got the way the updates are not working, and the esports program has got its hiccups. So it's just, it's crazy, man. It's crazy that we're in this position. It's absolutely insane to me.
And I agree. And honestly, I think most people that love this franchise would agree with you that there's no reason no matter what perspective you talk about Gears 5 right now, we shouldn't be in any of this. I mean, really, in my opinion, the only things, like, you can't even sit here and say campaign worked off launch. There was glitches with that.
Yeah.
And it's like really the only thing that I think might have worked the whole time is literally just the introduction of you doing like the training as Dell. I think that's the only thing that actually hasn't had a glitch or a problem. And I'm sure that if someone watches like the video, I'm sure there's going to be someone that comments, oh yeah, well actually I had this fucking problem during that time.
Sure enough.
And it just gets back to that whole thing where it's like, it was rushed. They didn't take the time to complete it. If they would have gave it 6 more months, would have been painstaking to wait as like a crazy Gears franchise fan, all that stuff like we all are. Well, yeah, but would it have been worth it? Yeah. Would we have been all right with it? Yes.
And I think there were negatives to it as well, just to play the devil's advocate, because it does hurt the esports program. You know, the hype dies down, and the people kind of talking about, not that there was a lot of them, but the people talking about the esports program based on E-League dies down. And so I definitely see the cons. And the other part is, I think there's a misconception that TC is this evil entity that hates us and hates Gears of War or hates any outside opinion on what Gears of War should be. They're really not. I mean, unless they're amazing actors and lied to my face, which I refuse to believe. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of the development team, and they love Gears. I mean, they're passionate about the game, and the people who work on the esports side are passionate about the esports. So it makes me feel like there's just something that we don't know and that they can't tell us or won't tell us for whatever reason that's causing these issues. And that's where my concern is, that it's almost like there's this entity that is causing these decisions to go the way they are, whether it be game related or esports program related. And that's what's causing the hurt that our community is feeling. And that sucks, because I don't know, that's like saying like I'm sick because God did it. Like, you know, that would just suck.
Yeah, that would definitely suck.
So, you know, like, and I don't want to touch on religion. Anybody who's religious out there, that's not meant to be like an insult. It's just, that's like the closest I can get to comparing it, though. There's just some entity that we can't see or touch or hear about or be told about, that, at least in my belief, that's causing these things to go the way they are. Because the people I've met, Ryan is not dumb. Ryan is a smart guy about game development. He is very in tune with what we say. He's talked to us. He's heard our feedback. So, and he seemed, especially the most recent time that I visited, very receptive to a lot of our ideas. So, like, what happens once we step out of the door? Like, who's coming out of the closet going, are they gone? All right, fuck everything they said. Like, you know what I mean? It's so odd to me. So we've been going for nearly 2 hours. This is my longest podcast. I want to close this out by talking to you a little bit about you for maybe 10 or so minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. Tell me, what other games are you into outside of Gears?
Well, outside of Gears, I honestly recently just got my first gaming PC in over 5-6 years, which has been a goal of mine. I was afraid that if I got it, that I would end up being on it more than other things, but just like everything else, I've done good time management. I really like strategic games, honestly, so I am a fan of Civilization. Survival horrors are fun as well, so I've been playing Dead by Daylight with some of my friends, and even some of my students actually from high school figured out my stream handle, or Steam handle. So I've been playing some Dead by Daylight with them. And I mean, I just overall, you know, I like a lot of strategic games. And Nintendo also, big fan of Nintendo. Yeah. I actually just started replaying my childhood with the Reignited trilogy of Spyro. I'm eventually going to get Crash Bandicoot because, I mean, they're what I grew up on. I mean, they were a lot of fun on the PlayStation. And then just on top of that, I mean, I'm just looking for more, I guess, start playing on Steam, because going with my brand initiative and content creation for my own personal self and branding, I do want to start getting into more Steam games and start playing with more viewers and followers through that means. So if anyone's got a wish list or games they want to send me to, you know, start checking out, send them over and I'll start playing them.
Yeah, for sure. I'll give you some suggestions after we're done. And then my last thing that I want to tell you or talk to you about, rather, you're obviously in esports as a competing amateur. Do you have any, like, is esports kind of like a goal of yours because you have your own business and you're also teaching and doing, you're working on your master's and your teaching certificate. So do you see esports being a career that you're looking at, or is it just like a hobby that if it, works out and you go pro, that's awesome. And if it doesn't, you've got your other stuff?
I mean, I do have my other stuff, and that's always my bread and butter. But at the same time, I put in the hours, I put in the time, I put in all the additional efforts I can to try to reach that pro status. That is definitely a goal. I haven't got close to that type of success in, many, many years now. I mean, the highest I ever placed was top 16. I mean, I could sit here and be like, oh, yeah, I got first regional. But we all know that's not the fucking same.
Yeah.
But I mean, I definitely am striving to do my best, and I want to get on that main stage. I mean, it kind of goes back to our progression conversation. Like, we ended up doing all this training, scrimming, practicing. Now we got to test the waters at San Diego, got top 32. Now the next step, of course, is like, yeah, I would like to get all the way to number 1. That's the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically speaking, now I just need to get the team to the next few rounds or improve so much that we can make that leap.
Yeah.
So the overall end goal is, yeah, I'd like to be on stage one day, main stage to play at least. I would definitely love to fucking hold that trophy. But is that going to be a hard goddamn thing to do? Absolutely. But that's what brings out the best in us. That's what brings the best competitors and sportsmen out of all of us that play it, because we know that there's always going to be some Cinderella stories. There's always going to be teams that are flying under the radar that can really prove a lot and shake up the scene. And yeah, the overall goal is one day I would love to be up there holding a trophy or even qualify for the pro league with my team. I always wanted to be able to do that. And, until my body or my mind tells me I can't do that shit anymore, I'm going to keep trying, because it's not only am I a competitor at heart, but again, like I said many times today, I absolutely love the franchise. I love the community. Every time I go to these events, I try to talk to all the amateurs I can. I run into pro sometime, and a short looking leprechaun type guy like me with a big ass beard, people know me. So I get to say hi to a lot of the community, and it's always a great time and experience. So
that's
a
awesome.
lot going on, but yeah, the end goal, try to get professional, try to win a championship. And then on top of that, just, be involved with the Gears family, because
enjoy yourself along the way.
We all love the game, and by happenstance, we're all actually really good people. We might not seem like it at times, but we really are.
Yeah.
We really hold together for each other and support each other. And that is definitely something that this community needs to hear over and over again, because going back to the whole, debate about TC in the community right now, we need to bond more than ever as a community and, again, become one voice. So yeah, a lot of different goals that I'm going to try to check off on the way.
Well, I respect it, man. That's a good note to end on, is come together. Brother, thank you so much for being on my first Ashcast Online episode. You've given me an amazing perspective that helps open my eyes to a lot of things that I actually don't get to consider often or even see often, and definitely not experience. So thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Is there anything you want to shout out here at the end of the video before we end it?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come on and talk. I mean, I greatly appreciate it. I'm always here trying to help out anyone I can in the community. Let's just end on the note that we all need to come together as one voice and try to make this work, try to make it right, get back to where we want the game to be as a community, not just individuals, but as a whole.
Awesome. And guys, I will have all of the links to any of his socials and website and everything like that down in the description of the video. So make sure you go check him out. Thank you so much for tuning in, listening, watching, whatever you've done. I appreciate it. And yeah, we will see you on the next episode of the Ashcast Online. Thank you, guys.